It's been a year and a half now since Russia invaded Ukraine. It was one of the many topics in this week's first GOP presidential debate. The United States has committed more than $60 billion to support Ukraine.
Ukraine is not a priority for the United States of America.
Ukraine is the first line of defense for us. And the problem that Vivek doesn't understand is he wants to hand Ukraine to Russia. He wants to let China eat Taiwan. He wants to go and stop funding Israel. You don't do that to friends.
Notably absent from the Republican debate was the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. He recently surrendered, as you know, to authorities in Georgia following a state indictment. Trump denies all these charges. Despite his legal challenges, the former president remains the leader in the polls with support from 52% of Republican voters. The candidates were asked about Mr. Trump. Take a listen.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
Someone's got to stop normalizing this conduct, okay? The conduct is beneath the office of President of the United States.
I want to bring in our political panel on the Hill this Sunday morning. Mike Ricci has been a Republican strategist for 18 years and a former communications director for former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. And Michael Starr Hopkins, as Democratic strategist, has worked on presidential campaigns for both former President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Good to have you both here in studio. If you look at that stage when Bret Baier asked them to raise their hands, the two guys on the end, Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie, did not raise their hand. Mike, I want to start with you. How do you make an argument that you should be the standard bearer of the Republican Party if you're not willing to say that the guy who was the standard bearer of the Republican Party should no longer hold that position because of these indictments?
Well, the problem is that a lot of these candidates are trying to do the opposite. They're trying to find a way to move past Trump without offending his many millions of supporters. And clearly it's a needle that nobody yet has been able to thread, as you saw in the way that people's hands went up, didn't go up. We're looking around. And it's just because there's so many people in that, Trump's taking up so much oxygen, nobody's really been able to crack that code yet of how to move past him without, again, offending his supporters.
But, in a way, with not having Trump there, it did give these other candidates, kind of room to show themselves a little bit that might not have had that had Donald Trump been in that stage. Michael, when you watched this, was there anybody that the Democrats looked at there and said, if Trump does not become this nominee, that's the guy we got to worry about? Or women.
I think the entire field was pretty forgettable in that debate. There was conversations about Tim Scott or Ron DeSantis, but you had awkward moments where Ron DeSantis kind of raised his hand but looked around and looked to see what everybody else was doing. Tim Scott, in his very affable way, kind of faded into the background. Democrats aren't in the business of making choices as to who the Republican nominee is, but we certainly aren't worried about anyone that was on that stage.
Well, you got to keep your eyes, though, on the field, though, because, this is ultimately going to be the other part that you're running against. Mike, when you looked at that debate the other night, everybody went into it saying, okay, with Trump not there, it's going to be pile-on Ron DeSantis. The other candidates seem to largely not pay a lot of attention to Ron DeSantis. So what does that tell us about how that field views second place right now?
Well, it could be something that other candidates come to regret, because DeSantis was largely able to survive generally unscathed. He was able to get in his points, and his performance was fine. It was serviceable. But Vivek clearly just almost a proxy for Trump on that stage. I went in thinking that he would be an X factor. I thought he was going to be sort of like the outsider who makes sense, and he didn't make a lot of sense at all. He was going somewhere, and then he just was kind of all over the place. And maybe he sees beauty in that chaos, but I'm not sure that other people did. But I will say that, yeah, I mean, you have to look at this debate less about winning votes at this point than more about winning influencers and trying to be that #1 contender to Trump. And that's what I think it kind of sets up the next debate, and see if we can winnow the field.
Well, if the goal was getting under Chris Christie's skin, I think he won that contest.
And everybody else.
Pretty clear, yeah, pretty clear that the former New Jersey governor wasn't appreciating a lot of things he had to say. There have been people that have pointed out that while these Republicans, did debate the other night, that there are Democrats who have announced for president that are not named Joe Biden. Should Joe Biden be out there debating, discussing, exchanging ideas with the other Democratic candidates in this primary field?
President Biden's out discussing and debating with the American voters every day. There's nobody in the field that's going to primary Joe Biden in any serious way. So there's no point in him having conversations where he lifts up people who aren't serious contenders. You know, when you talk about RFK Jr. or Marianne Williamsons of the world, those aren't serious Democrats. I wouldn't even call them Democrats. So no, there's no reason for Joe Biden to debate them.
But you can say the last time out, the debates, although at one point they did get cut short because of the pandemic, they helped Joe Biden because Joe Biden was able to kind of get into fighting shape. Is Joe Biden going to be at a detriment now because he has not been debating the way he had in previous campaigns?
No, Joe Biden's been traveling the country, talking to voters, pushing up his agenda. You know, actually, I think the debates were a weakness for President Trump, not Joe Biden. His childish antics, the interrupting, I think they hurt more his campaign more than it helped the Biden campaign.
All right, let's take a little bit more of a look at this. We're going to play some more sound from the debates the other night, starting with the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. Listen to this. All right, that's obviously the
It's at least a cute picture.
that's obviously the mugshot of Donald Trump. So as long as we had it up there,
might as well.
Let's put it back up again because I want to ask you about this. Donald Trump goes to Georgia, the Fulton County Jail. He gets his picture taken. You know, obviously this thing goes like wildfire across the internet, and everybody says, "Oh my God, that's terrible for Donald Trump." He raised $7 million since this thing came out. What does that tell you about the Republican base right now that supports Donald Trump, that when he goes and gets a mugshot, it's not, oh my goodness, this is a horrible thing, I have to find another candidate. It's, let's give him $7 million.
Yeah, let me say, Donald Trump may be excited about this mugshot. He may think it's good for fundraising. If you're a Republican, down ticket, if you're in a swing district, this is miserable for you because now every question you have to answer is about Donald Trump, whether or not you support him, whether or not you think he should be convicted, and that will cause Republicans to not just lose the House again, but also make sure that they don't win back the Senate.
Yeah, Tom, I think the biggest moment we may look back on from this is when he posted the mugshot on Twitter, kind of announcing that he was back on Twitter, putting the mugshot on merchandise, showing that basically this is what he's going to run on. He's going to run against, you know, the weaponization of government, the different special counsels looking into certain things involving President Biden. And so just clearly making it, obviously not taking it seriously. Obviously, yes, you should take a mugshot seriously. But, you know, we could be in 6 to 8 weeks, we could be talking about an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. So it'll be interesting to see how much oxygen will be taken up by these different legal things going on.
All of it.
Yeah.
All the oxygen.
Let's play that Mike Pence sound we were talking about just a minute ago. Take a listen to this.
I mean, Vivek, you recently said a president can't do everything. Well, I got news for you, Vivek. I've been in the hallway. I've been in the West Wing. A president of the United States has to confront every crisis facing America. I think unquestionably I am the best prepared, the most tested, the most qualified and proven conservative in this race.
I'm afraid we're dealing with the same type of amateur standing on stage tonight.
I'll tell you, I'm not a politician, Brett. You're right about that. I'm an entrepreneur. And I do think Brett is going to take an outsider.
Obviously, you know, Vivek Ramaswamy got under some nerves the other night. Let me flip that around away from him because he seemed to, you know, at every opportunity to try to grab the microphone. Who won the race as trying to be the adult in the room that night?
I think that Nikki Haley and Mike Pence, their experience in this format, their experience debating, their more recent experience in government really showed. Obviously, Christie landing the ChatGPT line on Vivek was great. Tim Scott, I think people were hoping for more, given all the money that he's put in, how much he's been introducing himself to voters, kind of having a chance to elevate his biography into more of a substantive argument against other candidates. He'll obviously have other opportunities, but I think people were expecting more from him.
And, you know, Michael, as we get into the situation where there are going to be more events, more debates on the Republican side, you know, the president is obviously going to need a forum to go out there and continue to talk to the American people if he wants to campaign and get the same amount of attention from these debates. What does he do? Does he do more town halls? How can you get that engagement that you might get in a debate without actually having a debate?
So I think he'll counter-program and do rallies and go do more events. But I think at some point he will show up on the debate stage.
But does he need something where he engages people, where it's not just him and a microphone?
No, I think actually for him, he's at his best when he's not answering questions.
So not
But
do
when
town
he's-
halls?
Yeah, I think it's going to be speeches for him and rallies, because if he gets on that stage, he's going to have two choices: either humiliate the entire field or worry that they're going to decide to gang up on him. And we've seen so far that this field has no appetite for taking on Trump, even though they're running against him.
All right. We appreciate both of you coming in this Sunday morning to talk with us about not only this debate, but the events in Fulton County earlier in the week. We're going to have both of you back real soon. Okay?
Thank you.